Shadows of the Future by Storm Queen 873. Chapter 11. Master, promise you won't let me become like the monster that killed Qui-Gon? Qui-Gon opened his eyes at the strange voice, slightly alarmed. It sounded quite a bit like Anakin, yet it was colder somehow, hardened to fine-tempered dura steel by some unknown event. He frowned then. There was no one else in the room. He'd returned from Yoda's meditation chamber approximately an hour ago, if the chrono on his wrist was to be believed, and had made himself a cup of tea to calm his tightening nerves. He then perched himself on one of the window seats, reading until he finished his tea, and then he knelt in the warm sun, relaxing into a deep meditation. Master? The voice came again, and his frown deepened. That certainly wasn't Obi-Wan. So who was addressing him? And where were they? Qui-Gon turned his head, blinking as the apartment around him began to blur and shift. He threw out a hand to steady himself as the room began spinning, and the sensation left him rather disoriented. When the motion finally stopped, he was in exactly the same place. Only his surroundings had changed drastically. Qui-Gon loved his apartment, considering it a veritable haven of warmth. He supposed he spent most of his time in the kitchen cooking and in front of the windows marveling at the sunset. He lived in these rooms for just under 30 years, and each apprentice had helped to shape the atmosphere as well. Simple artwork from his first apprentice covered many of the walls, and the woody rock centerpiece from his third apprentice was displayed proudly on the table. All of that was gone, he realized in alarm. The walls were stark white and barren. The table was coated with a thin layer of dust, and the kitchen had been stripped of everything that had made it his. What had happened to the knives he'd bought the moment he'd been given his own set of rooms, and the spice rack Tal had given him before her death? Had someone taken it? I know you can hear me, Master, the voice said, clearly exasperated, and Qui-Gon's attention finally drifted to the two occupants of the room, curiously out of focus, so that Qui-Gon couldn't tell who they were. They knelt before the other window. They faced each other and sat a rather good distance apart, considering that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon tended to sit knee to knee when they meditated together. There was a heavy sigh, one that was eerily familiar. And finally the master spoke. Yes, Padawan, I can hear you, but we are supposed to be meditating. Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon realized with a sickening jolt. Stars, his Padawan had sounded utterly exhausted. What had happened? Was Obi-Wan not sleeping again? When Qui-Gon focused on the larger of the two figures, the image cleared to reveal the young man. But he was not the same as Qui-Gon remembered. He still looked dimly like the 25-year-old Padawan. His hair was cropped in the Padawan cut, but the braid was gone, leaving only a small, sad little tuft to suggest it had ever existed. His shoulders hunched in a manner that spoke of some kind of heavy burden. His expression was drawn with grief, and his eyes were gray and glassy. And I'm not about to make a promise I can't keep, Obi-Wan added before shutting his eyes. Now center yourself. We are meditating. Qui-Gon would have promised, the other figure muttered, and Obi-Wan jerked upright with a sharp intake of breath, his eyes flying open. I'm sorry, the figure quickly added, though not much heart went behind it, and Qui-Gon found himself staring. I'm not him, Obi-Wan whispered, his eyes darkening and his posture slouching further. It was a while before Obi-Wan continued, drawing himself up and his voice holding a definite note of ice. Nor will I ever be. I cannot promise that I'll keep you from turning to the dark side, because the choice is entirely yours. I can give you the tools you need to find your way, but the rest is up to you. You don't care, do you? The other figure snapped, jumping to his feet. You don't care that he's gone! If he really meant so much to you, why aren't you upset? Why are you so quick to get rid of everything that was his? If being a Jedi means that I can't miss people who die, if it means being like you, then I don't want to be one! Qui-Gon tried to reach out to Obi-Wan, and he sat there, looking for the world like someone had slapped him. And Qui-Gon growled in frustration when his hands passed right through his Padawan. He could see the red ringing Obi-Wan's eye, the slight tremor to his shoulders, and part of him wanted to yell at the unknown figure. Why couldn't he see how much pain Obi-Wan was in? Was he blind? If that's what you want, Obi-Wan said at last, his voice flat, and he stood abruptly. I'll give you a day to think about it, and if you still don't want to be a Jedi, there are other options available to you," he added, but the other figure said nothing. Obi-Wan strode across the apartment, rapidly leaving the other figure behind. He stopped before the door, his hand resting on the door controls, and he glanced over his shoulder. "And you know nothing of my grief," Obi-Wan whispered, shadows flickering in his eyes. "Qui-Gon was my family, my father, and just because I don't show it around you doesn't mean I don't miss him with every shred of my soul." Qui-Gon shut his eyes at that statement, listening to the door hiss as Obi-Wan left, and when he opened his eyes, the scene was gone, replaced with the apartment he remembered. A shiver passed through his body, and he rubbed his upper arms vigorously, trying to rid himself of the chill that had settled on him, despite the patch of sun he sat in. What was that? A vision? A memory? "Neither, I hope," Qui-Gon thought, though without much conviction. "Where did it come from anyway? Surely not from Obi-Wan. I've been shielding our bond to prevent that from happening." The door chime sounded, and he sighed a little, blinking at the chrono on his wrist. Somehow it was nearly time for the council meeting. Standing and stretching out the stiffness that had settled in his limbs, he picked up the empty mug just as the chime rang again. He stretched out with the force, trying to get a sense of who was ringing the bell, as Obi-Wan would have simply entered. A light frown worked its way onto his face when he felt Bant Aaron's familiar patient presence waiting behind the Durasteel door. As something happened while he'd been meditating. "Hello, Master Jin," she greeted, bowing politely when he opened the door. "I ran into Obi-Wan and Anakin earlier, and your apprentice asked me if I would take Anakin while the two of you are at your meeting with the council. I know I'm a bit early, but I assumed that you would like plenty of time to get to the meeting."
"That's very thoughtful, Bant,"
Qui-Gon said, stepping aside to invite her in. He'd grown to like Obi-Wan's Mon Calamari friend over the years, and several times the two of them had united against the boy, forcing him to do something he was too stubborn to otherwise.
"But I'm afraid that they haven't returned yet. Would you like some tea while you wait?"
"That would be nice, thank you," she replied, stepping into the apartment, and Qui-Gon moved to the kitchen to boil some water. He heard Ben slide onto one of the stools as he began rummaging through the cabinets, searching for the teas Obi-Wan had purchased for whenever they had company. "I'll have whatever Obi-Wan usually does," she said, and he threw her a grateful smile over his shoulder. "Does he still favor that ridiculously sweet one?"
"Yes, I'm afraid,"
Obi-Wan said as the water began to boil, and he poured some into the waiting cup. "Then I'll just have to live with it," Bant said with a smile, and she bowed her head in thanks when he set the steaming mug in front of her. "So how was your last mission, Master Qui-Gon? Obi-Wan usually gives me a full blow-by-blow account whenever he gets back, but the sightseeing trip delayed him from doing so."
"There's not much to tell,"
Qui-Gon replied as she sipped her tea cautiously. It wasn't terribly hot, as Qui-Gon had cooled it to a non-scalding temperature with the Force before handing it to her.
"Yet another straightforward mission goes awry, forcing us to flee for our lives and stranding us on a desert planet. Once again, we're lucky to be here."
Bant cracked a smile. "I always wondered where Obi-Wan picked up a sense of humor," she mused, sipping her tea, and Qui-Gon gave her a smile. "Or perhaps he's rubbed off on you?"
"It is possible,"
Qui-Gon replied, and glanced up as he felt a stirring in the Force he knew was Obi-Wan. A few moments later, the door slid open and the Padawan walked into the apartment, a sleeping Anakin balanced on his hip as the boy clutched the Jedi tightly. Anakin's small arms were wrapped around Obi-Wan's shoulders, his hands wound into tunic fabric, and his face was pressed against Obi-Wan's neck. The Padawan smiled when he noticed the two of them and held a finger to his lips, warning them to be quiet.
"Had a long day, Obi-Wan?"
Qui-Gon said through the bond after dropping the shields he'd placed over it and finally sensed Obi-Wan's exhaustion. "You might say that, Master," Obi-Wan replied as he laid the boy gently on the couch and shimmied out of the knapsack that Qui-Gon hadn't noticed. "I'm sorry we're late. I'd meant to be back half an hour ago."
"You're still early, Padawan. There's nothing to worry about. I understand you had fun?"
he asked as Obi-Wan began rummaging around in the pack, pulling out two small boxes Qui-Gon recognized from Dex's diner.
"I see you managed to eat well for lunch."
Obi-Wan rolled his eyes as he tucked both boxes into the refrigeration unit. "We did, Master. Thank you for asking. Dex says hello and that he still owes you a meal. He did send you some dessert, though." "Obi-Wan, what happened?" Bant's whisper broke the silence, and Qui-Gon blinked at her in surprise. "Your tunic is smeared with blood!"
"Padawan!"
Obi-Wan sighed a little, and Qui-Gon wondered how he'd missed the sight. The front of his apprentice's tunic and the thighs of his pants were covered with long stains of blood, and they looked rather fresh. "Pleased to say it isn't yours or Anakin's," Bant whispered, and Obi-Wan shook his head. "You'd be proud, Master. We rescued a pathetic life form." We were just about to get on a bus to come back to the temple when Anakin found an animal that had been badly wounded by some children. I healed it as best I could, and we took it to a shelter for further treatment, Obi-Wan said, his gaze flicking over to the sleeping boy. He was already tired from walking around as much as we did, but once combined with emotional exhaustion, Anakin passed out the moment we left the shelter. Qui-Gon replied, though he was smiling. "Don't think you're going to live this one down, Padawan. You're picking up more of my habits than you care to admit."
"And you've been carrying him ever since?"
Bant asked, and when he nodded, she grinned, uttering a soft "Aww" that made Obi-Wan mentally roll his eyes.
"And I thought you didn't like initiates."
"I don't," Obi-Wan said. "They're too busy gawking at me to have any sort of conversation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a council meeting to clean up for." "Master, just think at all the pathetic creatures we could save, now that the both of us seemed to have developed a knack for attracting them," Obi-Wan said as he walked towards his room, and Qui-Gon shook his head slightly. "And would you mind waking up Anakin? He was looking forward to his swimming lesson with Bant, and I don't think he'd want to miss it because he was napping." "Whatever happened to a simple please, Padawan? When did you become so rude?" Qui-Gon replied, though he moved towards the couch. "You know me, Master. Wonderful role models and all that," came the distant reply, and he sensed Obi-Wan was hunting for a clean tunic that might have escaped his notice. "Remind me to do laundry once we get back, would you? Ugh, why was I so messy?" "You mean you're not anymore?" Qui-Gon asked, feigning shock. "Perhaps I should be thanking these mysterious visions of yours if they mean you'll clean your room properly for a change." "Ha ha, Master, you really aren't in the right field. Did you know that? You were born to entertain people, not save them," Obi-Wan replied, and Qui-Gon sent him a mental grin and a gentle slap. "Sarcasm will get you nowhere, Padawan." "Don't I know it? Ouch, of all the fucking places!" Obi-Wan's thoughts faded off into a general gaze of swearing, and Obi-Wan once again shook his head in wonder, not having the energy to be utterly scandalized. "Padawan, part of me wants to know where you learned such dreadful language, yet I believe I am better off in ignorance," he said once the storm subsided, and felt the laugh Obi-Wan sent him. "Perhaps," Obi-Wan said before something shifted in his tone. "Please, hold me to this oath, Master. I, Obi-Wan Kenobi, do hereby solemnly swear that from this day forth I shall clean my room properly, or may the Force take me where I stand." Qui-Gon crooked an eyebrow. "You broke something, didn't you?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Master," Obi-Wan replied, even though they both knew it was a lie. "Oh, alright, fine. I cracked a data pad or two, but nothing irreplaceable. Well, and I came close to destroying my favorite model. Happy now?" "Very much so. I've been waiting 12 long years for you to come around," Qui-Gon said, finally kneeling beside the couch and touched a hand to Anakin's tiny shoulder. "And don't you dare think I'm ever going to forget your pledge. I'll have you sign something the moment we get back." "God!" Obi-Wan exclaimed. "Because I repent! I denounce my slovenly ways! I'm tripping over everything, and I can't even find one decent tunic! There's one that might be passable, but it's rather wrinkled. Do you think the council would notice?" "Obi-Wan, you've had some kind of high sugar dose, haven't you?" "Why would you say that, Master? I only had a cream shake in Texas, and I didn't even drink it all. Anakin finished it off while I was talking to the cashier." Obi-Wan said, his thoughts coming quickly. There's one that's slightly less wrinkled, and it certainly smells better. Now for pants. Master, why haven't you woken Anakin yet?" "Padawan, you know there's a reason why I told you not to drink those, right?" Qui-Gon said, gently shaking Anakin as he did so. "They tend to make you rather impractical for hours afterward. In fact, I bet that's why Anakin passed out. He had a shake too, didn't he?" He sensed the affirmative. "Then he drank an entire one then, plus whatever was left from yours, and with that much sugar in a body completely unaccustomed to it, his mind had decided it was safer to sleep it off." "Please, Master, he's just tired. Must you overreact to everything?" Obi-Wan said, and Qui-Gon could sense his elation when he found another relatively clean article of clothing. Do you want me to wake him? Before Qui-Gon could say anything, he sensed the Force swell around Anakin, and the boy jerked upright, blinking at his surroundings. I'm on Obi-Wan! Anakin muttered, much to Qui-Gon's surprise. You didn't have to shout! There was a much gentler pulse, and Anakin smiled in response before yawning. It's alright, I probably needed to be up anyway, right? Oh, hi, Master Qui-Gon, sir. Where's Obi-Wan? I thought I was talking to him.
That's all right, Annie,
Qui-Gon said, setting aside his surprise as he watched the boy yawn again.
Are you too sleepy for the swimming lessons Bent promised you?
Anakin seemed to wake up completely at that, and he peered over Qui-Gon's shoulder at the Mon Calamari. Qui-Gon didn't need to turn to know she waved in response. Not at all, Anakin said, grinning. Changing to yourself, then? Bant said, and Anakin dove for the knapsack. We supply towels at the training pool, so you don't have to worry about bringing one. I'll be right back, he said, pulling a pair of navy blue shorts from the back and racing down the hall. He nearly collided with Obi-Wan, who skillfully sidestepped just in time. Have a good meeting, Obi-Wan, Anakin called as he passed the Padawan, who reached out and quickly ruffled the boy's hair in response. You too, Annie. If the meeting gets done quickly, I'll join you for your lesson, he called as the fresher door slid shut and an enthusiastic wizard was heard through the apartment. You two are so cute, Obi-Wan, Bant said as he entered the common space, tucking his sleeves into place and settling into his robe. Thank you, I suppose. Are you ready, Master? We're going to be late if we don't hurry, Obi-Wan replied, and Qui-Gon plucked his own robe from a chair he'd placed it on earlier.
Then by all means, Padawan, lead on.
Once they were in the lift, heading up to the main floor of the temple, Qui-Gon felt something in his Padawan shift, as though he were letting go of an emotion and sighing heavily in relief. Perhaps it was that strange attitude. Qui-Gon hadn't seen his apprentice that overexcited since his 13th birthday, when his friends dared him to eat a near impossible amount of candy with a disgusting quantity of sugar. Obi-Wan, of course, had done it, and Qui-Gon had come home to find his apprentice in the process of destroying the apartment. His friends had long since fled the scene, leaving Qui-Gon alone to deal with the problem, and he tried everything from sleep suggestions to tying the boy to a chair. But Obi-Wan had so much pent-up energy that he'd wake right back up again, or he wouldn't stop talking. He'd finally just collapsed, and Qui-Gon had nearly forbidden Obi-Wan from associating with his so-called friends after that, if it meant he would never again have to deal with a Padawan that was literally bouncing off the walls. There was a gentle tap on his shields from Obi-Wan, and he glanced at his apprentice curiously.
What is it, Padawan?
Qui-Gon asked. I wanted to know if you spoke to Master Yoda about my visions, Obi-Wan asked, his tone definitely calmer and his eyes shining seriously. And Qui-Gon quirked an eyebrow. And if you have, I was curious to know what he had to say.
Have you been snooping through my messages, Padawan? Qui-Gon asked. Why would you assume I would speak to Master Yoda about you?
Obi-Wan fixed him with a cool look, one that made Qui-Gon blink. It was the same look as the one the council gave him from time to time, when they knew he was dodging the question. He thought for a moment on where Obi-Wan could have learned it, as he tended to pay little attention to the council. Qui-Gon finally decided it wasn't impossible for his apprentice to have noticed, considering the amount of times it had happened. It's what I would have done, Master, Obi-Wan said at last, looking away. You don't understand what happened to me, and Master Yoda or the Temple Archives would be the most likely source of information regarding this particular situation. And since I know how much you hate slogging through the archives... All right, Qui-Gon broke in, fighting the urge to roll his eyes. I did speak with Master Yoda, as well as Mace, who actually came to get me, he said with a small sigh, turning his attention to the numbers that flashed over the doors, indicating the floors.
I shared with them everything that had occurred, save my own suspicions on what you saw, and we decided that your visions need to remain a secret for now. Master Yoda said that whatever you're hiding needs to stay hidden, at least until the proper time is at hand.
Ah, Obi-Wan replied. Am I safe in assuming that he didn't mention that proper time? Qui-Gon huffed a little, sensing Obi-Wan's small smile. They stepped out into the main hall before making their way to another lift that ascended to the top of the middle spire.
You would be correct,
Qui-Gon said, his tone growing a touch theatrical.
I was left to suffer in silence, with my own Padawan sanctioned by Master Yoda to keep secrets from me.
It's not so bad, Master, Obi-Wan said as they waited for the lift to arrive, and Qui-Gon threw him an incredulous stare, which he responded to by grinning faintly. At least I'm not attacking people who wake me.
That's only because you're putting yourself into some kind of healing trance instead of actually sleeping.
Qui-Gon muttered and earned himself a rather confused stare from his apprentice, to which he responded with a look of exasperation.
Oh, stop that. You know what I'm talking about.
I'm afraid I don't, Master, Obi-Wan said as the lift arrived and they stepped on board. Do you mean my sleeping habits have completely changed?
From their usual haphazard manner? Yes,
Qui-Gon said, and Obi-Wan snorted quietly. Master, I broke myself of that particular habit years ago, Obi-Wan said, and Qui-Gon found himself staring at his apprentice. I started waking up with too many bruises from hitting my arms and legs on bulkheads in my sleep, so I did something about it.
Either you're finding a way to lie to me, or I am the most unobservant master in the temple,
Qui-Gon said, looking away in shock for a moment.
Well then, cheeky Padawan mine, would you at least share what else happened during your little outing with Anakin? I think I know you well enough to know when you are dodging a question, and if the blood wasn't yours or Anakin's, whose was it?
He heard Obi-Wan sigh as his ears popped from the speed of the lift ascending. Well, it was one of the children's. One of the ones who attacked the creature in the first place, Obi-Wan said, and Qui-Gon looked at him in surprise. No, I didn't hurt anyone, Master. Anakin attacked one of the boys before I could stop him, and by the time I managed to pull him off, he'd broken the boy's nose. His hands were covered in blood, which transferred to my clothes when I touched him.
Why didn't you mention this earlier, Obi-Wan?
Qui-Gon asked, watching his apprentice closely. Obi-Wan's shoulders had hunched slightly, and his eyes focused inwardly as they faded to a stricken gray.
This event disturbs you,
Qui-Gon added, tilting his head in an expression of curiosity.
Why?
Because of the way Anakin reacted, Obi-Wan said, shaking his head a little. He was furious, Master, and I'm not sure what would have happened had I been unable to pull him away and calm him down. Qui-Gon replied, pursing his lips a little.
This is what has disturbed you so, Padawan?
He could feel Obi-Wan's shock as his apprentice glanced at him sharply. You mean it shouldn't, Master? Qui-Gon shrugged and quirked an eyebrow at Obi-Wan.
If he were older, say, your age, and still reacting so violently, then I might be more concerned. But he is still a child, Obi-Wan, and children have much more growing to do. The fact that you were able to calm him down at all, if he really was as angry as you say, shows that he is growing in the proper direction.
Obi-Wan remained silent, contemplating Qui-Gon's words, and the older man turned away before speaking again.
And I seem to recall a certain not quite 13-year-old who had trouble with his own temper until he got himself a master.
Oh, really? Obi-Wan asked, and Qui-Gon could sense his smile. Whom do you speak of, Master? All the not quite 13-year-olds I know have perfect temperaments.
I suppose I should start looking for these perfect children, then, Qui-Gon replied as the lift began to slow. I'll need one after my latest apprentice is knighted.
Qui-Gon heard Obi-Wan snort, and the older Jedi grinned before continuing.
Well, I suppose I'll have to introduce you to the one with the temper problem, even though I'm sure you've met him. He's rather tall for his age, even though I have the feeling he'll be of average height by the time he's finished growing. He's got spiky reddish hair. You couldn't miss him if you saw him around.
Anything more distinguishing, Master? You've described quite a few children, and I want to be sure I've got the right one, Obi-Wan said as the doors opened and they stepped out onto the foyer, heading towards the main council chamber.
Oh, it's really easy to find him, Padawan,
Qui-Gon said.
You'll know it's him because his sense of humor is so awful it makes his poor master grind his teeth.
Obi-Wan snorted again as the doors slid open to admit them, and he fell a respectful step behind Qui-Gon. Oh, so that's the one you've been talking about, Master, Obi-Wan said softly. I know him rather well, and I'll be sure to tell him just what you said next time I find myself in front of a mirror. Qui-Gon fought to keep his face impassive as they stepped into the main chamber, the attention of all 12 council members shifting in their direction. He sent one final gentle mental swat before focusing on the task at hand, sensing Obi-Wan doing the same. Qui-Gon, Padawan Kenobi, Mace Windu greeted as they stepped onto the yellow-tiled floor, bowing in unison. Qui-Gon hoped the council wouldn't notice that Obi-Wan's bow was just as shallow and curt as his own was.
I thought he revered the council,
Qui-Gon thought in the back of his mind as he greeted the other Jedi Masters, thanking them for seeing him as promptly as they could, and watching Yoda's gaze flick to Obi-Wan briefly.
He certainly admonished me enough times about defying them.
We've read your report regarding your mission to Naboo, and we would like to commend you on your ability to bring the Queen to safety, as unorthodox as it was, Mace said, and Qui-Gon noticed his gaze
also flicked to Obi-Wan, as though he were studying the Padawan for his own proof of what Qui-Gon had said.
But we find your mentioning of a Jedi-trained assassin rather disturbing. Would you care to explain this to the Council?
We also checked our records, Master Jin.
Another master spoke up, a woman with olive-colored skin and inky black hair. Her sharp brown eyes studied the both of them, and Qui-Gon resisted the urge to shift from foot to foot.
And there is no mention of a Zabrak with the facial tattoos you described.
Qui-Gon wanted to roll his eyes, but strove to shield his exasperation as best he could. Of course they weren't going to find a student by cross-referencing those two clues. Tattoos could easily be added, and data files could easily be erased, no matter what the archivists might otherwise claim.
Nevertheless,
Qui-Gon said, bowing his head to the female master,
I know what I fought, and my opponent was using a modified He-Shaki defense, one that had been altered for extensive attack purposes.
The council seemed to draw a collective breath at that, and he could hear a few masters muttering to each other.
You know as well as I that only someone with access to our archives or a highly skilled master could have taught him that.
Qui-Gon continued as he met Yoda's gaze, watching the old master's eyes narrow in speculation.
Mentioned as well you did that the dark side your opponent used,
Yoda said, and the entire council seemed to freeze as they held their breath.
A mistake some feel you must have made.
Qui-Gon felt his eyebrows rise at that. The council doubted his ability to recognize a Darksider when he met one? Even after all that had happened to him with his second apprentice?
I only reported what I saw and felt, masters,
Qui-Gon said, striving to keep his voice utterly calm.
Having fought someone who used the dark side before, I believe I have been well trained in recognizing it.
Qui-Gon sensed Obi-Wan's concealed smirk through their bond as his words hung in the air and several of the masters shifted in their chairs, their gazes flicking to each other uneasily.
I must also inform the council of a dark presence that touched us upon our landing at Coruscant,
Qui-Gon added, exciting another round of shocked whispers.
I could not place it in my formal report, as I had already submitted it just before our landing, but I must tell the council that it was most powerful.
This is grave news indeed, Mace said, leaning back into his chair and pressing his fingertips together, a thoughtful frown on his face. Tell us, Qui-Gon, what is your explanation of the situation? Qui-Gon drew a deep breath, bracing himself mentally.
It is one I am certain the council will wish it hadn't heard,
he said, almost smiling at the thought everyone sent him. Yet hear it they shall.
I believe the Sith have returned.
If the response to an undetected Darksider had been unusual for the council, their response to the second bit of news was extremely uncharacteristic. Outright gasps rolled through the chamber, and several masters began muttering furiously with each other. Had the council been anything like the Senate, Qui-Gon mused silently, most of the masters would be on their feet and yelling by now, trying to deny his outlandish claims. Since it was not, however, Mace merely fixed him with a stunned look once the whispers died down. You believe you fought as Sith, Lord? The man asked, studying Qui-Gon with wide eyes.
That is impossible, another master interjected. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
And I do not believe they could have returned without us knowing, Mace added, his gaze narrowing, and Qui-Gon spread his hands in a smaller version of a shrug.
It is what I feel,
he said, watching Mace glance at Yoda.
The man I fought was much stronger in the dark side than any turned Jedi, and I believe he followed us to Coruscant.
Yoda murmured in response, and the council fell silent at his soft utterance.
Certain of this, are you?
Qui-Gon spread his hands again, dipping his head a little toward Yoda.
I feel it is the only explanation.
Then in grave danger, the Republic is, if involved, the Sith are,
Yoda said quietly, making several heads turn in surprise.
True, the Obis are when dealing with the Sith. A master and an apprentice. If to Coruscant without our knowledge, one or both have come, very cautiously we must tread.
After all, came a quiet thought that Qui-Gon wasn't sure was from Obi-Wan. What better place to hide than in the shadow of the Jedi? It's the last place we'd expect.
You believe this, Master Yoda, without further examination?
An alien master asked, and Qui-Gon recognized his voice as the one who had earlier denied the Sith's existence.
Surely you are being too quick to judge.
Sense the looming shadow I have.
Yoda replied, his gaze turning from member to member as he spoke, his voice dropping an octave to impress his seriousness.
Slowly but surely, grown larger it has, intending to cover us all. It is, but since its true purpose, I do not.
Chaos, came the startling thought, but Qui-Gon once again wasn't sure if it had come from Obi-Wan or from deep within his own mind.
Surprise me, the news of this possible Sith does not. A warning it is of dark times ahead, and act swiftly we must if intend to counter it we do.
Yoda finished, settling back into his chair.
What must we do?
A newer master asked, as several continued to shift in their chairs, Yoda's words rankling them further.
How are we to stop this going shadow?
Meditate on it I shall.
Yoda said, though Qui-Gon noticed the almost imperceptible glance he gave Obi-Wan.
Discuss this more we must. Once done so, I have.
And what of the situation with Queen Amidala?
Qui-Gon asked.
I have no doubt she was the assassin's target, and if he has indeed followed us, she will need protection.
Then we will assign more protection for her,
Mace said.
Select another master to assist you, Qui-Gon, and guard her.
No.
Yoda said, and Qui-Gon frowned in surprise at the master, who was shaking his head slowly.
In danger this noble queen is, but tells me Qui-Gon is needed at the temple the Force does. Assign 2 different masters to protect the queen, we will.
Mace raised his eyebrows slightly at that bit of information, but no one argued. Qui-Gon himself was almost too stunned to reply.
Very well, Mace said. We shall select a different team later today and let Qui-Gon debrief them on what they're up against.
Qui-Gon bowed a little to express his agreement, and frowned inwardly when he felt Yoda's gaze upon him.
Since you have more to say, I do.
Yoda said as he lifted his head and nodded once, earning a blink of surprise from Mace.
During our mission, I encountered a boy with the highest midichlorian count this temple has ever seen.
Qui-Gon began, earning quite a few raised eyebrows.
The Force swirls around him in a way I have never seen before, as though every choice he makes is woven into history itself, affecting everything and everyone in the galaxy.
You brought him with you?
Mace asked, and Qui-Gon nodded again.
Intend Jedi training for him, you do?
Yoda asked shrewdly.
I only ask for him to be tested.
Mace and Yoda shared another look, before fixing Qui-Gon with twin stares, ones that expressed mingling curiosity and incredulity.
There's something you weren't telling us, Qui-Gon,
Mace said, leaning back.
A high midichlorian count wouldn't be enough for you to bring him all the way from his home, even if you did sense the Force react differently to him.
Qui-Gon felt the urge to sigh. He had been hoping to leave this part out of it.
I have reason to believe he may have been conceived by the midichlorians.
There was little reaction to his words, though he supposed after learning of potential Sith, nothing would faze the council now, and he met Mace's harrowing gaze.
You believe this boy can be the one from the ancient prophecy,
Mace said, tapping a finger against his thigh.
the one who is said to bring balance to the Force.
But one kind. How do you define balance? Came the thought, and Qui-Gon shook off the quiet chill it instilled.
I do,
Qui-Gon replied, tucking his hands into the sleeves of his robe.
and so I ask for him to be tested.
Thought nothing to do with the fate of this boy, should we be furious?
Yoda said, frowning lightly at Qui-Gon.
Test him we will, but meditate on your actions you must, if unfit for training he is.
I did what I felt was right.
Qui-Gon replied, trying to hide his spiking annoyance.
I believe it was the will of the Force in finding him.
Perhaps, but we will decide whether or not he will be trained.
Mace said, and made a small placating gesture with his hand when Qui-Gon frowned lightly.
Bring him before us tomorrow and we will test him. Until then, I declare this meeting adjourned. May the Force be with you, Qui-Gon, Padawan Kenobi.
Qui-Gon sighed a little but bowed and made his way towards the exit, Obi-Wan following him closely. Neither said a word until they were in the lift heading back down to the main floor of the temple. And even then, only Obi-Wan's soft sigh broke the silence. They're blind, no matter what year it is. The strange thought came just as the lift began to slow, no more than a faint whisper. It is no wonder we crumbled so easily. If Master Yoda hadn't said anything, they would have chosen to remain blissfully ignorant until it was too late. Qui-Gon frowned, still unable to tell where the thought was coming from, and he glanced at Obi-Wan, who was staring off into space.
Padawan?
he queried, tapping on Obi-Wan's shield lightly, and watched his apprentice start a little. Oh, sorry, Master, I was just thinking about the meeting, Obi-Wan said, and Qui-Gon frowned inwardly. So that thought had come from Obi-Wan.
Oh?
Qui-Gon asked, as a faint chime sounded and the doors slid open.
I'm curious, Padawan. What did you think of the Council's reaction?
I couldn't believe they chose to question you about the assassin, and I had to bite my tongue so I wouldn't remind them of Xanatos, Obi-Wan said as they stepped out into the main hall, intending to return to their apartment. But I understand the position, as few would care to hear the news you gave them.
That be true,
Qui-Gon said, as they boarded the lift leading to their floor.
I'm glad you didn't speak up. It would have landed you in trouble.
I know, Master, Obi-Wan sent. A Padawan disrespecting the Council by pointing out something that should be obvious? Why, you'd never see me alive again.
Qui-Gon chuckled. We got to have that now, can we?
Certainly not, Obi-Wan replied, and glanced at his wrist chrono. Well, Master, that took less time than I had anticipated. How would you feel about joining Anakin and Bant?